Hello and welcome to Church Chat. With the Youth Synod taking place in Rome, one of the questions which normally comes up is the question of homosexuality and the Catholic Church's teaching. This is a very difficult issue, a very hard issue for many people to accept, with many inside the Church calling for change and many outside of the Church as well, hoping for change. But today I thought we would like to offer those people who are inside the Church, do have same-sex attractions, and also believe fully in the Church teaching. So today we are joined by one of those who do so and are going to offer their viewpoint on this issue. So welcome, Elena, to Holy Family Studios in Moss End.
Thank you.
So before we start, obviously, let's get the elephant out of the room. You are from Canada, but you live in Scotland. Can you give us a wee background to your involvement with the Church?
I converted at 19. That's a really long story. Suffice it to say, I fell in love with the Eucharist. And once that happened, there was nothing else for it.
Yeah.
Became Catholic at 19, and about 5 years ago, my mother moved back to Scotland to be closer to her mother. And about 3 years ago, I followed because I missed my mom and my sisters and my granny. And
yeah, so that explains why you've got the Canadian accent then, and you're here.
It explains why I'm the only one in the room with a sane accent.
Well, that's one way of putting it. But so, you know, a lot of the debate at the Synod is about the use of language. So we're seeing the word LGBT come into some of the documents. You yourself have a differing view of that?
I don't think it's right to label a person by their sexual preference or their sexual orientation. I don't think that makes a person who they are. And I do understand people who think that way, because I used to think that way. I used to think that being a lesbian or having same-sex attraction was as much a part of who I was as being Catholic or being a woman or being Canadian. But since I've moved here, I've actually found that even being Canadian isn't as much a part of who I am, that really the core essential of identity comes down to being a child of God.
Yeah, so what would be the preferred for you? You say others disagree, but you know the Church has a set way of referencing, and we're discussing this issue. What would the words be?
I would prefer person with same-sex attraction. And some people will say same-sex attracted persons. I think even that is imperfect, because we want to say person first. This person, this son or daughter of God who experiences attractions to the same sex.
Yeah, because it's interesting, because obviously, you know, I myself have been quite lazy in the past and called people by their identities, called them gay or lesbian or referenced them that way. It's not really something I've really thought about, but I guess if you think about it, it does have that implication that they are in a relationship with someone, or or not in a relationship with someone. So I guess that removes that doubt, that labelling of someone.
Well, it removes the freedom of choice, because it's true you can't choose your experience, but you can choose what to do about that experience. You can choose your decisions and your choices. And just because I experience same-sex attraction doesn't mean that I align myself with the political goals of the LGBT policy machine. And it doesn't mean that I'm going to seek out a relationship with another woman. And it doesn't mean that I would ever do anything to pull me away from the Church.
Yeah. I mean, obviously there is that inherent tension between having homosexual attractions and being Catholic, because if we look at the Catechism of the Catholic Church, a lot of people take exception to the language used. And obviously, may I just say to the audience watching that the Catechism of the Catholic Church is a theological document. So a lot of people take these words literally sometimes when they have to be placed in their proper theological context. So I'm going to maybe just for the debate and discussion here, read what the Catholic Church Catechism says on homosexual attractions. It says that Homosexuality refers to relations between men and women who experience an exclusive or predominant sexual attraction to persons of the same sex. It has taken a great variety of forms through the centuries and in different cultures, and its psychological genesis remains largely unexplained. Basing itself on sacred scripture, which presents itself homosexual acts as acts of grave depravity, tradition has always declared that homosexual acts are intrinsically disordered, right? So that's the line that causes the jar with people. But I always try and point out that there's a wider context to this document here that says that the number of men and women who have deep-seated homosexual attractions is not negligible. Obviously, we all know someone, family, friends, or otherwise, who have had these experiences. This inclination, which is objectively disordered, it says it again, constitutes for them a trial. So that's the first indication of compassion, as far as I'm concerned there. You may not agree with me on that, but they must be accepted with respect, compassion and sensitivity. Every sign of unjust discrimination in their regard should be avoided. So that part to me always seems missed out, and they focus on the theological line of the concept of sin, of something which is intrinsically disordered. Now, what would your thoughts be on that, being someone with a same-sex attraction?
I think that people either focus on one side or the other of the teaching, and very few people bring both together. I think it is equally lacking in charity and in compassion to just focus on supporting someone and agreeing with everything to the exclusion of truth. And I think you need both, and you need the completeness of the Catechism. So if you just read the second half of that paragraph or just the first half of that paragraph, you're going to be missing out. I think people don't know what intrinsically disordered means, because when you look at the Catechism, it is a theological document. It's using language of the church and language in a way that we're not used to experiencing. So when we're reading that, or like when I'm reading that as a person with same-sex attraction, I might be tempted to take that personally, to read that and say that the church is saying that I'm intrinsically disordered, but it's not. It's saying that the attraction that I'm experiencing is intrinsically disordered, that acting on that would be disordered.
Yeah.
And it would be in the same way that it's kind of a really theological topic, and I would suggest reading this book. Can I hold it up?
Yeah, who is this book by?
Father Michael Schmitz. It's called Made for Love. And he really goes into the theology in a very simplified way, so that you can understand it. For example, he talks about the what it isness of a thing, saying what is a human being, and then what it is forness.
Yeah, it's interesting because people home in on this passage of the Catechism, which is really, it's a wide passage on, it talks about a variety of issues regarding chastity. So it's not just exclusively people with same-sex attraction. It mentions as well that masturbation is, of course, intrinsically disordered act, which can be carried out by a heterosexual person, homosexual.
Or contraception.
Contraception as well, yeah. These are issues which are covered in this document, and it's not exclusively an attack on someone with same-sex attraction. So obviously, though, there are...
It's not even an attack, it's so much as a medicine.
Yeah, what do you mean? Could you maybe elaborate on that further?
Well, you need the truth in order to be able to pursue the truth. Yeah. So it's not an attack to say, for example, that contraception is wrong. I'm not attacking anyone by saying that. Now, maybe you're someone who uses contraception, that's, but I'm not attacking you to say that contraception is wrong or to use contraception as a sin. I'm offering you the truth. You can take it or leave it.
Yeah, it's funny because, as objectively there have been, you hear stories, there have been people who have been let down by the church in this area, whether the priest or the layperson didn't have the insight or the knowledge of it, or maybe even just through ignorance. And it's a shame that so many people with this, you can call it a struggle because there is a tension there, felt that the church wasn't at home for them. What has your experience been living? I know you're not practicing homosexual, you stick to the church teaching, but the knowledge that you are same-sex attracted, how has that gone for you occasionally?
First I came into the church and I kind of was hoping that this God that I was getting to know was going to miraculously cure or take away my same-sex attraction. And when that didn't happen according to my timetable and my expectations, I kind of went haywire for a while. I gave up hope and I gave up trusting in God. And for a while, I did feel like I could come into Mass. And even if the priest didn't say a word about sexuality, like he didn't have to say a word, even if there was nobody said a thing about sexual attraction or homosexuality or anything, I would still feel uncomfortable. And I think part of that was because of my conscience, and it was an internal struggle. And I think people maybe experience that and want to put that on someone else, to blame someone for making them feel that way, when really, I was feeling that way inside myself because of decisions I was making that weren't in line with the teaching of the church.
Yeah.
So I think that could be part of it, that it's that discomfort of conscience.
Yeah.
And I think part of it is also that there are people within the church who experience same-sex attraction who are struggling with this sin. But we don't necessarily always wear a sign. It was never stamped on my forehead. It was, and so you'd sit in conversation with not necessarily a priest, even just with other Catholics, at a prayer meeting or at, a coffee date with some friends from Mass, and people would get talking on this topic of LGBT politics, and they would say, oh, gay people are this and gay people are that. And you'd always feel like the conversation suddenly become us and them, talking about, them, those gay people. And I'd feel like what maybe nobody at the table except for me realized was that I was a part of them, that I had become a part of other than the church. And something that, again, Father Mike Schmidt does really well is to say that it's us. It's us. We are all one in the church. We are all a part of the church. And to not themify.
There is that some comments, you hear is that the church is trying to put across its teaching, which it holds dearly and sincerely and believes that is for the best for everyone, that it talks too much about homosexuality, that homosexuals are singled out for criticism, whereas the other sins are discussed, and I say sin because theologically the Catholics believe that homosexuality is a sin, like contraception, adultery, these things are not brought up as much. So how do you think the best approach would be for the church to broach this theological issue in a pastoral way?
I think to include it in those other issues, to, not necessarily have a homily speaking about just same-sex attraction, to speak about same-sex attraction, contraception, marriage after divorce or remarriage, to speak about all of those things together, because all of these things are a symptom of a culture that doesn't see what sexuality is ordered towards. I'm going to go back to that word, ordered, disordered. When we say, for example, that homosexuality is disordered, it's disordered in the way that contraception is disordered. And I'm gonna steal from Father Mike Schmitz. I'm gonna talk about his analogy or his example was eating. When you're eating, there are two ends to eating. So eating is ordered towards two goods of the person. It's ordered towards pleasure. So when you eat that delicious pumpkin pie, I know you're thinking.
Try pumpkin pie, still time.
Or when you're eating that amazing chocolate bar, that's ordered towards pleasure. When you're eating those vegetables and you hate those vegetables, they're disgusting, but you're eating them, that is ordered towards nourishment. But ideally, when you're eating, it should be ordered towards both ends, and you never are supposed to eat to not get nourishment. So you might see a disorder in eating or an eating disorder when someone, for example, like the ancient Romans used to, really enjoys eating and eats for the pleasure, but then makes themselves throw up to contravene the end of nourishment. So if someone has bulimia or anorexia, you don't say, they're not going to get offended if you say that's an eating disorder. It's disordered, and you're not saying that they're a bad person. You're not saying that it's not a put down. You're saying that this is not ordered towards the ends of eating, that this is not ordered towards your good, what you're doing. The same thing with sexuality. Sexuality has two ends: the end of procreation and the end of union. Now, people will say, what about the couple who's infertile? The thing is that when they still have that sexual act, it's still open. It's still possible, theoretically, for them to conceive a child. It is not possible, theoretically, for two women or two men to conceive a child.
Yeah.
You would need outside intervention. It's not naturally possible. So the act is not naturally ordered towards both of the ends that sexuality needs to be ordered towards in order to fully fulfill its purpose.
Yeah, that's very insightful. I didn't really think about it that way, so that's quite an interesting take, and a good explanation actually of what the church teaches regarding order, not just for homosexuals but for heterosexual couples as well, like regarding chastity in marriage, which is sometimes not lacking as well, but through masturbation, pornography, adultery, all these... Contraception, yeah.
Contraception is a disorder because it's preventing
that
one of the
act.
ends. It's the same thing as eating and making yourself throw up.
Yeah.
It's having sex but refusing one of the natural ends.
So, yeah, and now go back to the same-sex attraction. You find yourself same-sex attracted, and then as a Catholic, what would you present the options as being from your point of view? In fact, interestingly, you became a Catholic knowing what the church taught on this issue. Can you explain why you chose to do that, not another denomination that was more easygoing on them?
I initially didn't really accept that I had same-sex attraction. It was something that I thought, I'm not really attracted to men, so maybe I'm attracted to women, but I don't know. But I was watching a very popular show at the time, Sex and the City. And it was one of my favorite shows. I watched every episode, and my favorite character, Charlotte, near the end of the series, converted to Judaism so that her partner could marry her. And I remember watching that and thinking, I don't want to do that. I want whatever my religion is, I want my relationship with God to be first. And then if I have a romantic relationship of any kind, I want it to be ordered towards God. I want God to be first. And I don't know why I knew that. I knew that. So at that time, I read a copy of the Quran. I knocked on a Greek Orthodox church door and asked them to tell me everything about their religion. They gave me a copy of their Catechism. I invited Jehovah's Witnesses over to my house. Yes, they got an invite. I went to a Baha'i faith circle and visited them.
You've been around?
I called a synagogue quite a few times, but I've never seemed to get through to them. And eventually, I ended up at a Catholic Mass. I received a blessing from a priest and was so moved by the love that I felt from that blessing that I ended up calling him up and asking him, are you the priest who said Mass at the school the other day? And he was like, yeah, that's me. And I was like, tell me everything about the church. And he's like, let's go for coffee.
More coffee?
It was a few coffees.
So yeah, that's the decision. But it's funny that aspect of the church teaching didn't put you off. What would that be?
It didn't even enter the equation because I didn't even think about it until after. I was much more worried about the Eucharist and would God want me. I remember sitting in the Adoration Chapel after we had talked about the Eucharist and thinking, these Catholics, they're insane. Like, they actually believe that is Jesus. Like, that a priest says some words and there's the body and blood of Christ. Like, okay. And then I started to pray in the Adoration Chapel in front of Jesus. And I started to find that in that time praying with him, bits of scripture that didn't make sense to me would make sense. and that prayers would just, like questions would just be answered just in his presence. And I was given so much grace in his presence that I came to believe in the true presence in the Eucharist.
And that's what's guiding you on. But of course, outside the sacramental life, you've also got the support of groups like Courage, for example, which you're involved in. So maybe, people watching it and maybe have the same doubts, confusions in their mind, might want to explore what Courage is. What is Courage and how do you get involved?
Courage is an international apostolate. We're just starting our first chapter here in Scotland, in Paisley Diocese. And so it's very much in the Genesis stage. Right now it's still growing. But it's international. It is the only apostolate for Catholics with same-sex attraction that has canonical status in the Church, because it does adhere to the teachings of the Church. I'll read to you the 5 goals of Courage.
Yep.
To live chaste lives in accordance with the Roman Catholic Church's teaching on homosexuality, so chastity. To dedicate our entire lives to Christ through service to others, spiritual reading, prayer, meditation, individual spiritual direction, frequent attendance at Mass, and the frequent reception of the sacraments of reconciliation in the Eucharist, so prayer and dedication. To foster a spirit of fellowship in which we may share with one another our thoughts and experiences, and so ensure that no one will have to face the problems of homosexuality alone, so fellowship. To be mindful of the truth that chaste friendships are not only possible but necessary in a chaste Christian life, and to encourage one another in forming and sustaining these friendships, so support, and to live lives that may serve as good example to others, so to be a good example or role model.
And I think that's one of the reasons you expressed an interest in coming to speak about this, is that it's not easy talking about something that's so personal to yourself. Obviously, it's a very sensitive topic, hard topic to discuss, even more so if it's personal to yourself. But you felt a calling to maybe speak about this publicly, and what was your hopes for doing so?
My hopes for doing so was to be an example to other people. I think that when I was really struggling the most, I looked through all of the saints that I could find, thinking, there's got to be one for me. There's so many saints in this church. There's got to be somebody who struggled with same-sex attraction and still became a saint. And I couldn't find one. I couldn't find someone who had these desires and overcame them, or went counter to their own internal desires and still, and ended up a saint. But a lot of the saints' lives are hidden. So you look at St. Mary Magdalene as an example. She doesn't glorify prostitution, but she is an example to people who maybe struggled or experienced or were prostitutes in their lives, that they can become saints, that Christ can redeem even them. And I think we need those saints in our church. And I keep thinking, was it St. Pope John Paul II who said, we're called to be saints. And I think the saints of this generation, many of the saints are going to come from the Courage Apostolate. They're going to come from the people who, despite the call of the world, saying, go cheer up and find yourself a girlfriend, despite that call, stuck to their guns and were willing to take the harder road, for sure, and we're willing to be crucified with Christ.
So, for those who are struggling with this, there is a contact email for the Paisley Courage group, and I'll put that below on the screen and on the post for those who are interested in learning more about it. Also, they have a variety of authors. Matthew Schmitz, Father Matthew Schmitz, Mike Schmitz, sorry. Father Mike Schmitz, Made in Love, that's a book recommended. And
Made for Love.
Yeah, Made for Love. Yep, we can see that there. Yep, so we'll put posts and links to that as well, and some of other Father Mike Schmitz videos if those are interested. And also, I wish to finally thank you for coming here today and doing that, talking about this issue, because it's not often you hear that side. You hear a lot of vocal support for changes in church teaching, but we know there are probably hundreds, thousands of people who are living chaste lives with same-sex attraction in the Catholic Church, and perhaps maybe someone's watching today has seen your video and thought, maybe I'm going to inspire them on, encourage them on. So you're also a singer.
Yes.
You're a singer, so you're going to close with something more positive, hopefully, in a kind of more hopeful way, and a nice way of ending this interview. Hopefully, we'll see. So we'll give the final word to Elena Fike. Take it away.
So this is called Song of Hope. If a flower starts to wither, leave the roots for a while, and new life will grow. If the world starts to seem bitter, spend some time with the child to see the sweetness of youth. No darkness can defeat the coming dawn. No night can win against morning. If you wait and trust in the Lord through our pain, we will grow. Through the cross we find life.